Welcome to the world of probiotic foods. This is Cultured Food Life with your host, Donna Schwenk.
Today we're going to talk about how to make bubbly fruit-flavored kombucha. There is like nothing better than fruit-flavored kombucha. And for those of you who don't want to spend the money to buy it, you can make it just like some of those brands in the store. So many years ago, a friend of mine had a bad car wreck and he actually broke the steering wheel off with his chest. He was in the hospital, completely miserable on a gazillion painkillers and medications. His wife, Paula, who's a good friend of mine, told me about what a hard time he was having. I suggested she go buy him some kombucha and bring it to him. It made him feel so much better. And then he was able to go off his painkillers and come home and started making kombucha himself. He was so convinced that it helped him so much. And I have learned how to make the fruit-flavored kombucha and taught him how to do it. And this was, over 20 years ago. He actually made the best fruit-flavored kombucha I'd ever had. He made gallons of it each week, and I loved his. Kombucha is a powerful detoxifier. It will lift your mood because it's loaded with vitamins, probiotics, lots of B vitamins, and it will just make you feel great. It does it every time I have it. And I just can't say enough about it. And I have a whole blog on why I drink kombucha. I think it's like 7 to 10 reasons of why I have kombucha every day. And I also have a podcast on that too. And I'll link that in the description too. It will help you gain knowledge and understanding as to why fermented wonder drinks can be so good for you. They have so many properties that we need. And especially when you need a pickup, kombucha is a great one to reach for. Now, if you're going to buy some from the store, I recommend GT Synergy Kombucha because they're one of the only ones that isn't pasteurizing it anymore. The other ones lightly pasteurize it to keep it stable on store shelves, but he's really developed a fine art on how to keep his kombucha from, being too bubbly. And he's very, very conscientious about his kombucha and what he does. And he hasn't altered the recipe. And it's one of the biggest on the market. And it was around before anybody else was around, and I love him. I love to support his kombucha because it's fabulous. Now, 2 very important things you should know before you start. This will determine how bubbly and how fast your kombucha will ferment. The temperature in your home is crucial to understanding. It can be done in just a few days if it's at like 75 to 80 degrees. Or on the other hand, temperatures close to 60 can take weeks, and sometimes it won't ferment because it's too cold. So you need to check your bottles often to make sure they don't explode. And you really want to keep it at around 75 to 80 degrees. But 75 works really well too. If you wanted to ferment it faster, move it to a warmer spot. And that will make it go really fast. So again, make sure you check that because I've had many kombucha bottles explode because it was too warm in my home. So my husband has painted our ceiling many a times because there were grape stains on it. So we haven't done that in a long time. So anyway, I figured it out. But kombucha likes like 78, 75 degrees. He really likes that temperature. And in the winter when it's cold, we have brew belts that you can regulate the temperature on that will allow it to ferment at that temperature. You don't want to get too hot because, temperatures, it doesn't like 90s and 100s. And then that really causes fermentation to struggle. The yeast struggle, the good bacteria struggles, and it can kill your kombucha too. So you don't want it too hot. It doesn't have to be perfect all the time, but around 75, 78, under 80 is best for kombucha. Now, one of the most important things to make sure your kombucha is going to be bubbly is to make sure that when you're using so you're taking a regular fermented kombucha before it has fruit in it, the ones that you just make on the counter, you got to make sure it's not too sour or overly vinegary tasting. If it is, it won't get bubbly, no matter how much juice you add, because those good yeast will have died that make it bubbly. There'll be other good bacteria in it, but those yeast will die that make the kombucha bubbly. So if it's really, really sour and tart and vinegary, you should use it as vinegar or another. I've got 10 ways to use your over fermented kombucha. Don't try to second ferment it with fruit because it just won't get bubbly. It'll stay flat because it needs those sugars to carbonate and create the creation. And if all the sugar is gone, it's vinegary, it will have nothing to eat to make the natural carbonation because those yeast will have died. So it's best to make your kombucha just a tiny, tiny bit sweet. And then you second ferment it. And by second fermenting, what I mean is, okay, so you take a bottle and you put 2 ounces of juice in that bottle and then fill up your, 16-ounce bottle with the kombucha. That's how easy it is. And then you let it second ferment on your counter. And you need to make sure, really be sure that you get good bottles made for brewing because there's a lot of pressure in those bottles. And if you get those cheap craft bottles from store like Hobby Lobby, things like that, they'll explode on you. So you do not want that. You want good bottles made for brewing. I have an Amazon storefront. I'll show you the bottles that I use. They have those flip tops on them. You can use like Groshland beer bottles. Those work. GT Synergy kombucha bottles work too. They work great to second ferment your kombucha. So, but you want to make sure that it's just a tiny bit sweet. And then add 2 ounces of juice and 16 ounces of regular kombucha and then let it ferment. Now, the kombucha that's already been brewed and ready to drink, you can add any kind of fruit juice you want, cherry, grape, blueberry, pomegranate, lemon, pineapple. You can add a small, tiny piece of fruit, although I caution you if you do this because it can make it super explosive and bubbly. Those fruit pieces, they get really fermented. So you could use like orange peel's better or lemon peel. That'll give it more fizz because it's like a prebiotic for the juice. But you got to add juice, and then you could add a little bit of flavorings like orange or lemon peel. When you're using fresh raw juices that you've juiced yourself, the fermentation time will be cut in half. And they can explode really easily because those fresh enzymes and things in there make it go fast. So you check that thing several times a day because it can really ferment. I like to use a plastic or glass funnel to get the juices into the bottle. Just makes it easier. I use 16 ounces, but you can also do, 32 ounces, just double the juice. All of those will, work. We have had some people have trouble with some brands of juice that I'm not sure what's in them that makes them not ferment. I think it's simply orange juice is the one people really have a hard time with. So I don't recommend that. But most juices, even frozen juices, you can use those. Just make them into juice, and you can use those in your kombucha, and it works really, really well. So you just make sure you get some bottles that are super strong and made for brewing, and they're going to make you such good kombucha. And then they're safer because they have those little rubber seals on them that allow them to release tiny bits of pressure. So when you go to make your kombucha, always make sure that whenever you're making kombucha, that you watch the fermentation and taste it. You can stick a straw in there, put your finger on the top, and take some out and taste it, see where it's at, and you'll know whether it's sweet or tart, just a little bit sweet. And then some of my favorite second fermented kombuchas with juice, white grape juice. Those get very, very bubbly, by the way. Grape juice does. But I like the white grape a lot. I like cranberry isn't as bubbly because it has less sugars. And so that may not be as bubbly for you, but it still gets bubbly, but not as bubbly because there's less sugar in it. You're looking for about 29 to 32 carbohydrates per cup, I think is what it says. And remember, that sugar is not for you. It's for the microbes and the good yeast. They're going to eat that sugar out of the bottle, and they're going to drop 85% of the sugars. You're going to get like 3 or 4 carbs, per 8 ounces of carbs in kombucha, and it just eats up all the sugar. And so that's one of the good things about this bubbly drink. It just works really, really well to give you a probiotic drink with fizz that many people want. That doesn't have all the fructose corn syrup and, nowadays the sugars in these sodas, they're so, so bad for you. And they create a lot of inflammation. And this does the exact opposite. and it has naturally occurred carbonation. It's not forced carbonation. You're not getting those kind of additives that they put in there. It's a naturally occurring carbonation that the yeasts make themselves, good yeast, because we don't talk about good yeast. And remember, kombucha has S. boulardii, which is a good yeast, a probiotic yeast, and it's one of the most used probiotics in hospitals. It helps with acute diarrhea, antibiotic-associated diarrhea, because sometimes antibiotics will cause that, and S. boulardii is fabulous for that. This is one of the reasons I have friends who drink this, because it really restored a lot of their gut flora after they had been on so many antibiotics. And it can't be killed by antibiotics because it's a yeast. It's a good yeast probiotic. Now, there are other probiotics in it, but that one is the one you're really looking for that creates so much wellness in the body. And it actually kills Candida, S. boulardii does. It doesn't, and it's actually one that dominates, kills it, and keeps it in its rightful place in your body. Because you do need small amounts of Candida, just not large amounts. And S. boulardii is not something that lasts in the body very long. It is a transient probiotic. So what it does is after 2 to 3 days of ingesting it, it creates this way to protect your gut lining and it will attract pathogens to it. And then when it exits the body in 4 or 5 days, it takes all those pathogens with it. That's what's so cool about it. So that's why I love it so much. And I love the fruit flavored ones. There's all different kinds you can make, and you can experiment. Lemon, I want to tell you about lemon. If you do lemon juice, you need to add a little bit of sugar to it because there's not much carbohydrates in lemon. So like a teaspoon of sugar and dissolve it in the lemon juice because those microbes need that. It's not for you, remember. It's for the microbes to consume and make your soda bubbly. But if you use things like lemon and even lime, you would need to add a little bit of sugar. You can use raw sugar or whatever. It's just going to eat it up. So I have lots and lots of recipes for kombucha on my website, and I'll put that link in the description below because you'll have all kinds of different ways that you can make it and have fun, experiment with it. We do all kinds of different stuff because we love it so much. So anyway, that's how you make bubbly fruit flavored kombucha. And it's fun, it's easy, and it's a lot less expensive than buying it at the store. So thanks for listening, guys, and I hope you'll give it a try. Have a great week.